angels waging war in the unseen realm. Global events fulfilling biblical prophecy. Eternal life. What lies beyond mortality? From analyzing the paranormal from a biblical worldview to the discussion of cutting-edge science and technology, conspiracy, discovery, special investigative reports. Unafraid to explore the challenging issues facing humanity. Welcome to another edition of SkyWatchTV.
As we see the headlines each week, it's easy to come to the conclusion that the world has gone mad. Welcome to Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert. Our guest is an expert on the political situation in the Middle East. He brings a unique perspective, raised in the United States, lives in Israel, and a student of the Soviet Union. And of course, they're having a lot of influence on what's happening in the greater Middle East these days. He's the author of 7 books, always in demand at conferences. In fact, he'll be one of the featured speakers at the Rocky Mountain International Prophecy Conference in Pikes Peak this July. Avi Lipkin, welcome him to Skywatch TV.
Happy to be here.
This is something I've been watching with some interest. Your 7th book, Islamic Rivalry, ISIS and Iran Fighting for the Heart of the Islamic Identity. And the situation in Syria got a lot more interesting. I mean, it was deadly enough watching the Shias and the Alawites, backed by the Shia power Iran, fighting with the Sunni rebels, who are splintered into a number of different groups: Jabhat al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, of course the Islamic State, which is fundamentalist Islamic as you can possibly get. And then suddenly, last October, Russia jumped into this mess. What is Putin's game in the Middle East, and how does this change the dynamic of what's happening in Syria and in the Islamic world?
Okay, well, firstly, I believe that the Russians have a self-interest in preventing, and they've said it, preventing Chechens, other Islamic groups, Turkic groups, from coming into Russia and destroying Russia from within. And so the idea is to take out as many of these Sunni Eurasian terrorists before they go back to Russia and do the harm that they could do.
Russia fought a long war against Chechen separatists, and those were Muslims. A very nasty war against the Chechens.
You know, I have to tell you something, and I understand we have a little more time for this show, so I'm going to go a little more in depth. I have a personal connection with all of this because my predecessor, my great-great-great, whoever it was brought over from Germany in the 1600s to Poland to build the walls of Warsaw. And we were knighted by the King of Poland with the name Stone, Kamień, in Russian, Polish, and Slavic. And I think also probably I got my blue eyes through the King of Poland because my brother had a DNA test. He's got Norwegian genes. How did I get Norwegian genes? My mom used to look like Ingrid Bergman. Anyway, I think that my predecessor married the daughter of the king. People would prostrate when they were leaving him. You know, so like it was like Joseph and Pharaoh.
Yes.
Joseph also was given a local Egyptian woman.
Right.
The Jews became the tax collectors of the King of Poland. So of course the Ukrainians hated them because the Polish were the conquerors of the Ukraine. The Russians hated them because the Polish were the conquerors of Russia. And what you have is you have these different Slavic nations, the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Poles. You have other Slavic nations also. But I focus on Russia, Poland, and Ukraine. The Turks were burning Warsaw. They were burning Moscow. They were burning Kiev. They encircled Vienna.
Came as close as Vienna. And that was in the 18th century, wasn't it?
Well, the final battle which dislodged them was 1683.
Okay, 1683.
They were there already 100 and something years before. And the King of Poland marched with his army straight south from Poland, and together with some German barons who came down. In other words, it was Christianity against Islam. And there were Jews actually on both sides. There were Jews in the Polish army, there were Jews in the Turkish army. Jews or whatever army in whatever country they live. Anyway, what happened eventually was that the Ukrainians rose up in a very horrible revolt against the Polish. They killed Polish noblemen and Polish priests from the Catholic Church. And of course, they killed the Jews. Then the Russians came in and suppressed the Ukrainians and suppressed the Polish, and the Russians took over. Part of their wars were with the Turks. And the Russians were... I was on Radio Moscow in 1994 in Russian, because I studied Russian. And I said to them that Russia is now not the enemy of the United States. I said communism is finished after 1989. Now it's Russia. And actually, Russia became a Russian Orthodox nationalist country. There's no more communism, no more atheism. And I said that Russia, US, Europe, and Israel should become allies in a common front against Islam. I said, Russia's been fighting Islam for 1,000 years. Okay, this is very important to stress. Who are the Russians fighting? The Turks and the Turkic nations. These Turks hate the Russians because it's a perpetual enemy. The Turks look at the Russians like the Jews look at the Nazis. I mean, it's a very big, deep hatred. We have a group in Israel called the Circassians. And the Circassians are Turkic Muslims from a place called Sochi. Sochi is where the Olympics were.
Right.
The Winter Olympics.
Right.
And there's a hill in the middle of the town. It's called Red Hill. Why are they called Red Hill? And not because of communism. It's Red Hill because of the blood of 3 million Circassians, Turkish Muslims, who were killed by the Tsarist army in 1854 during the Crimean War. So I heard a Circassian army officer in the Israeli army telling the history, because the Circassians then fled to Israel. The Turkish army set them up as mercenaries in the land of Israel. You know, like living in Israel, you're in the middle of the storm. All these storms are around us. Okay.
Well, it's been that way for 4,000, almost 5,000 years. So
Israel is very central
to
a lot of histories of a lot of countries.
Right.
So you have Chechens in the Caucasus, you have the Circassians, you have the Tatars. Tatar is another group of Turks in Crimea, which Russia took from the Ukraine.
Right.
But it was Turkey before. The Tatars were Turkey. And you have you have Kalmyks, you have many different types of Turkic tribes living in Russia.
And I don't think people understand that there's the pan-Turkic movement, that there are Turkish peoples as far as the western province of China, Xinjiang province.
I just got invited to speak in China because China has a very big problem now. And there's nobody qualified to talk in China about Islam. These 7 books are being translated as we're speaking into Chinese. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I got to go to China now. I don't know when I have time. I'm forming a Judeo-Christian party. I'm a politician. I'm the Jewish Huckabee. I got to stay home in Israel now and run for office. But anyway, the point is that the Sunni Turks hate the Russians for 1,000 years. Now, the enemy of my enemy is my ally. So what do the Russians do? They go to the Shiites. The Shiites have been fighting with the Sunnis for 1,400 years.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to tell a little joke. Usually when I have a lot of time, I tell jokes. This is a little bit longer show. And, the Catholics and the Protestants were fighting each other in wars of Reformation for 300 years. But now, I go to churches all over the world. I see Catholics and Protestants seated in the Protestant churches and Catholics and Protestants seated together in the Catholic church. And people intermarry, and one week they go to this church, the other week they go to the other church. I know a lot of Christians are not going to be happy with what I'm saying, but I feel the love and the overcoming of the hatreds that the Catholics and Protestants had for each other. So the joke is about an Irish Catholic priest in Northern Ireland in Belfast. And he's always ranting and raving against the Protestants. So he gets a call from the Catholic Archbishop, who says with his Irish accent, "Father O'Malley, I have been receiving reports you're bashing the Protestants. We're now working for peace in Northern Ireland. Is that clear? Now you preach the gospel." So he gets up Sunday in the Catholic Church during the Mass, gives a sermon, and he says with his Irish accent, he says, "And Jesus was having the Last Supper. And he said, one of you will betray me." So Matthew gets up, "Is it I, your brother?" No, Mark gets up, "Is I, your..." All the disciples. Last one is Judas. So Judas gets up with his British accent and says, "I say, old chap, is it I?" But the thing is, the Christians, Catholic or Protestant, they can get over it and laugh. I mean, of course, you still have people in Northern Ireland fighting each other, but more or less, I mean, Australia is a country built on on prisoners from the English crown. Catholic and Protestant were all sent to Australia. So Australia's a very swinging place. In America, I speak in Spanish also, in Hispanic churches. So I go down to Brownsville, Harlingen, all these places near the Mexican border. And praise God, the Hispanics, they have 12 kids, so 6 go to the Catholic church, 6 go to the Protestant church. The next week, when I go to they switch, so it's a party. Shiites and Sunnis have been slaughtering each other for 1,400 years, and there is no end in sight.
Yeah.
And the civil war in Syria, no end in sight. And God is using that, like I said in the previous program, like 2 Chronicles chapter 20, where the enemies of Israel destroy each other. Syria was 20 million people. It's now 10 million. It's going to go down to 5 million. It's going to go down to 0. They're just self-destructing. And Israel, actually, believe it or not, is helping in a humanitarian manner both the Sunnis and the Shiites.
Now, I've read some reports of the emergency medical teams that cross the border from the Golan Heights to bring injured people back across. And some of these are injured fighters from these rebel groups, these Sunni rebel groups that would just as soon shoot the Jewish people as anything. But they're bringing them over and treating them in hospital. Yeah.
Well, listen, in Israel sometimes if there's a problem or a demonstration or terrorism or something, we treat the terrorists. Once they're injured, they're not terrorists. They're injured. We deal with them. Afterwards, they go to jail if they're terrorists, But we are very humanitarian in our medical treatment of everyone.
Well, the situation in Syria, as you mentioned earlier, there are a number of groups. You've got the Sunnis comprising about half the population on one side. The other side, you've got a coalition of Druze and Alawite and Christians and other Kurds and so forth who band together for protection, essentially.
Yes.
Because otherwise, the Sunnis pick them off one at a time, and it's just an ugly situation. The situation on the Golan Heights and the border with Lebanon. Of course, Hezbollah has been fighting on the side of the government of Assad in Syria, and they've been taking up positions on the Golan Heights. There's been reports recently that they have been actually taking some Palestinians from the refugee camps in southern Lebanon and training them and setting them up in positions across the border from the Golan Heights. How is all of this ultimately going to affect Israel? I mean, are they going to keep fighting forever, or will at some point they say, "Hey, enemy of my enemy, let's concentrate our fire across the border into Israel"?
That's an excellent question, but it's also a very difficult question to answer. So let me explain. The Russians, let's go back to the Russians. The Russians have a strategic problem. The Russians are facing off against an enemy. The Sunnis are 85% of Islam. So if the Muslims are 1.5 billion, 85% is about 1,300,000. I don't know. I didn't even know this until recently, until I really got into it. What we used to remember as the Soviet Union, and included the Islamic republics of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. Right there, you had 200 million Turks who were Soviets. When Russia shed all of these Islamic republics, Russia today is like Italy. It's 150 million people. And of the 150 million people, there are also a lot of Muslims still living in Russia. There are even reports that within not a very long time, the conscripts in the Russian army of Muslim background will be equal. They will be parity with the Christians. So Russia is going to be facing an ethnic demographic problem in the not too distant future. At this time, we see two divergent trends in Russia. We see the great strengthening of Christianity, praise God, and the Russian Orthodox Church. They're not too nice to Western missionaries and Protestant groups.
Right.
But the Russian Orthodox Church, it's kind of like Israel. The Orthodox rabbis control in Israel, even though the other groups do want to be in the picture. So but on the other hand, Putin is building these tremendous mosques in Moscow for his citizens who are Turkic Muslims to pacify them and to kind of like restore order so that Russia can prosper. Now, the problem now with Syria is that Russia is going bankrupt. Russia is losing a lot of its economic strength.
Yeah, the price of oil is so low.
And that's another thing. The price of oil goes down. Russia does not have really a varied economy like the United States or even like Europe. The Russians depend on raw materials, on even gold, silver, diamonds, which they mine in Russia, but of course petroleum. So the economy is suffering. I would even venture to say, you know, I don't want to say I love or I don't love Putin, but I will say one thing: he is in very, very grave danger that some oligarch, for whom that oligarch's god is money, and if they feel that Putin is getting in the way, you know, the one world government, who we all know what the one world government is, will say to that oligarch who's got his money, take him out. You know. So actually, I pray for Putin because I pray for Russia to remain a Christian country.
Yeah, it's almost been strange watching how Putin has positioned himself as a defender of Christendom against radical Islam.
You know what? I go to the old city of Jerusalem to meet with my Christian Arab friends, and they say to me, why is it that Vladimir Putin is the savior of Christianity in the Middle East, and that the President of the United States is the supporter of ISIS in Saudi Arabia and the Holocaust of the Christians in the Middle East?
Right.
So I'm very, very concerned because I see a role reversal. The Christians are now the Russians and the Muslims are now the Americans. And Obama has also said America is the greatest Muslim country on earth.
Yeah, yeah.
And Putin has said that what made Russia great is its Christianity. So what we're seeing here is, and now I suppose we can get to the real strategic point here. America, Europe backs the Sunnis. Russia, maybe China also, but Russia supports the Shiites. Okay. Now, to answer your question about Hezbollah, Hezbollah has something very wrong in their brain. The Sunnis are going to win, in my opinion. The Shiites cannot win because the Shiites are 300 million compared to it's 200 million compared to 1.3 billion Sunnis.
Right.
The volunteers pouring into Syria to fight the Russians and fight the Shiites and fight everyone far outweighs whatever the Shiites are. The Shiite volunteers are drying up. And I'm going to share something now which is going to shock you, and it's going to stagger the mind for the people watching. You know, there's a group, like I mentioned in the previous program, the Druze. D-R-U-Z-E. People sometimes think the Druze are the Jews and Jews are the Druze, but they're cousins. And the Druze were thrown out of Islam 1,000 years ago because they said that Jethro is the greatest and latest of the prophets, not Muhammad. So, of course, they're despised by the Arab world. They speak Arabic. They're, by customs and by language, they're really... they're Arabians. I proved that Jethro was the black stone in Mecca with Moses and Aaron. It's in my yellow book. So Israel has 100,000 Jews. There are Jews living in Lebanon. There are Jews living in Syria. There are Jews living in Jordan. And Jews, like I said before, like the Circassians, they're professional soldiers.
Yeah.
And actually, the conscription of the Druze in the Israeli army is higher than the Jewish people in the Israeli army.
I've read that, yeah.
The Druze are very patriotic. They're good fighters. I love the Jews. So what happened in the civil war is that Bashar al-Assad was losing. This was until the Russians came in September.
Yeah.
Okay. And so just before the Russians came in, Bashar al-Assad said to the Druze living in the south of Syria, on the mountain of the Druze, it's called Jebel Druze, he said, we cannot defend you anymore. You're on your own. So the Druze, 100,000 in Israel, 30,000 in the Golan Heights, who are loyal to Syria, but they're under Israeli rule. Okay. So the 100 plus the 30,000 plus the Druze of Lebanon, and I don't know exactly the number there, said, we want to go into Syria and to reinforce the Druze troops on Jebel Druze, because there are 700,000 Jews there. And they're surrounded by ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda, who have sworn to wipe them all out.
Right.
In other words, killing 700,000 Druze, God forbid, that's a Holocaust for the Druze people. The Druze are like the Jews. They're a small group of people. And
surrounded, in an unfriendly neighborhood,
So we have in Israel a member of our Knesset. His name is Ayub Kara. And he's a great guy. He's a member of the Likud party. He's a nationalist Israeli, part of the Likud party, which is a nationalist party. And he came to Netanyahu and said, let us go. We'll volunteer. We're not asking Israel to invade Syria. the world will go nuts.
Yeah.
If Israel moves across the Golan Heights. And that's when the Russians came in. So all of a sudden the whole thing was quieted. For those people watching this show right now, and I say you have to look at how God works. In Genesis 12:3, it says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. So Israel made peace with Egypt. Now, through a very convoluted system and a convoluted reality, the Egyptian military today works very closely with the Israeli military because of ISIS. Mm-hmm. Jordan works very close with Israel because Israel provides Jordan with technology for its agriculture, the drip irrigation. Mm-hmm. And the whole Jordan River Valley now is lit up at night. I remember when I moved to Israel 48 years ago, it was dark. The Jordan River Valley was nothing. It's full of lights, and population has grown, and the Jordanians are prospering through their peace agreement with Israel. Not only that, in Jordan, they had water in their tap 2 days of the week. Oof. 5 days there was no water. Jordan doesn't have water.
Yeah.
Today, there's water in the taps. Why? Israel provides Jordan with all its water needs. Mm-hmm. Israel spends billions of dollars on desalination.
Yeah.
So we give the Jordanians, as part of the peace agreement, all the water they need. Not only that.
We need to have some Israeli technicians and engineers come over to California and help them out. So anyway.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're doing it in California now also. But Israel is helping with desalination in many countries now.
Yep.
So anyway, so all of a sudden, Jordan takes in 1.6 million Syrian refugees. Israel is providing water for them too. So you see, Jordan is blessed by blessing Israel with peace. Egypt is blessed by blessing Israel with peace. Mm-hmm. Who doesn't bless Israel? Syria. And you know what? We have prime ministers. Rabin was ready to sign an agreement to hand over the Golan. Because of the hard-headedness of Hafiz al-Assad, it didn't happen. Then Ehud Barak, another former prime minister, had it all agreed. They even say that Netanyahu was ready to hand over the Golan Heights. He denies it. But what I'm saying is, you want to make peace with your neighbors,
Yeah.
And with Jordan it worked, and with Egypt it worked for now.
That's very interesting because Daniel chapter 11, the last five verses of Daniel 11, reads like a prophecy of a future war with led by the figure we call the Antichrist, but in defeating nearby enemies of Israel, Edom, Moab, and Ammon.
Which is 2 Chronicles chapter 20 also.
Yeah, will escape out of his hand. In other words, it could be that it's because that there will be some sort of a peace between the people of Israel and those nations. Anyway, just random thought.
Anyway, what I wanted to say is when I was in training as an officer in the Army Spokesman's office in Israel, we were told in the 1990s there's one country left, and that's Syria. And they have missiles, they have atomic and biological and chemical weapons, and it was an enemy to be dealt with. And Iraq is still officially at war with Israel. Mm-hmm. So I ask you, and ask all the believers watching this show, where are Syria and Iraq today? They don't exist anymore.
No, they don't.
They're
for all
gone.
Intents and purposes.
Everything is
right.
cantons.
Yeah.
And so God destroys anyone who comes against Israel. As long as America is a Christian country, God destroys anyone who comes against America. The problem is an internal problem. What is the heart and soul of the American people? Is the United States still a Christian country, or is it becoming a Muslim country?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
Or we've just moved into a post-Christian, atheistic or pagan type world, a pagan nation.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, and I want to answer your question. I haven't answered your question yet about Hezbollah. I've been beating around the bush, and I want to finish this with Hezbollah. There's a Jordanian comedian, stand-up, great guy. The thing is, in Islam, you really cannot make fun of your own people and your own religion.
I was wondering how that worked.
It's the opposite of Western Christianity or Israel. And he was pretending to be an ISIS guard at a checkpoint. And a car drives up to the checkpoint, and so they roll down the window. Hey, good morning, how are you? In Arabic, everything in Arabic. Really friendly guy. He said, where are you guys from? He says, oh, we're from Lebanon. Oh, you're from Lebanon. Shh. He didn't ask, are they Christian, are they Sunnis, are they Shiites, or are they Druze? He just killed them. Why? Okay, no. This is something Hezbollah should be thinking about. To kill the Christians is obvious. To kill the Druze is obvious. To kill The Shiites is obvious. But the ISIS people are also going to kill their own Sunni Muslims because the Sunnis of Lebanon have had a tradition of tolerance of all the other groups. So what's going to happen is that the terrorists, the ISIS people, Jabhat al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, they have to conquer Lebanon.
Yeah.
I believe the 4 ethnic groups of Lebanon will come together and say to Israel, you got to save us. Russia won't be able to do it anymore. The minority groups in Syria, including the Druze, are going to say to Israel, you have to come into Syria 20 miles. It's about 20 miles to Jebel Druze. You Israelis have to save us. And so what's going to happen is you have presidents, Republican and Democrat, who've been saying to Israel for the last 50, 60 years to return all the land to the enemy countries. Israel's borders are going to grow. Israel's borders are not going to shrink.
Yeah.
And when ISIS takes Jordan and Saudi Arabia, which it will do, I believe, Israel will have to take Jordan and Saudi Arabia too. So Israel's borders are going to expand in all directions, which is Deuteronomy 11.
As I was going to say,
God is proving that his word is true all along.
Avi Lipkin, always a fascinating conversation and always an education. He'll be one of the featured speakers at the Prophecy Conference, the Rocky Mountain International Prophecy Conference in Pikes Peak this summer. We look forward to that. Website, vicmord.com. Avi, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
We thank you for watching as we keep watch. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is SkyWatch TV. Save nearly half off the cover price when you subscribe now to the brand new SkyWatch TV magazine. For a limited time from April 24th through June 24th, 60 days only, a 5-year subscription to SkyWatch TV magazine is just $99. That's more than $75 off the cover price, which is like getting 2 years for free. Exclusive content, articles on prophecy, discovery, and the supernatural from Tom Horn, Chris Putnam, Josh Peck, science updates from Sharon K. Gilbert, geopolitics from yours truly, and guest writers like Pulitzer Prize-nominated journalist Troy Anderson, renowned Bible scholar Dr. Michael Heiser, Pentagon advisor Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis, and more. But there is more. As an early subscriber, you'll be the first to get this new book from Defender Publishing. I predict what 12 global experts believe you'll see by 2025. This is a $20 value and includes best-selling authors like Joel Richardson, Mark Biltz, Carl Gallups, Tom Horn, Paul McGuire, and more. Find out what they think about the coming war between ISIS and the Vatican, the future of the Temple Mount and the Ark of the Covenant, a worldwide manifestation of angels, and the coming age of human hybrids. And we'll also add this DVD, The Best of SkyWatch TV 2015, a $25 value, including our most compelling interviews from last year, including Chuck Missler, Steve Quayle, the discussion of the Georgia Guidestones with Chris Pinto, and more. All of this together worth more than $200, yours now for just $99, but only through June 24th. Subscribe now, SkyWatch TV magazine. Just call the number on your screen or log on to skywatchtvstore.com.